What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and I want to talk about what is a fundamental change to the way Dungeons & Dragons works. This has been making its rounds on the internet. I've seen it, you've probably seen it already as well, but I said, hey, I should make a video on it. And it has to do with all the stuff we heard from the Future of D&D panel where they said they were going to change the way stat blocks were done in the new Monsters Coming from Mordenkainen's Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, but was also changed in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So I want to show you that because it has a huge, there's like cascading effects that change the way we play Dungeons & Dragons. I don't think that was intentional, but it's real, and I feel like people are looking at it either from that perspective or new stat blocks, not both. But before we dive into that, I wanted to talk to you about the sponsor, a returning sponsor for today's video, our good friends over at Describe, which, by the way, did clinch the Best Online Content Any Award this year at the Ennies at Gen Con. And if you're unfamiliar, this is finely crafted box text that you can use to spice up your game, use it to create character hooks, plot points, NPCs, and so on. There's over 4,100 scenes here, and obviously you can subscribe in a variety of different ways, different tiers and things. And if you use the coupon code NERDIMMERSION, which is linked in the description down below, and click that tracking link for me as well, you'll get 10% off your first purchase, and it helps to support the channel. But I also wanted to show you that we're talking about Fireball's the big ticket item that we're going to be talking about today, so I thought we would read the Fireball spell, which is written by Matt Cernit, who used to work for WotC and was part of the Lore You Should Know team. The red seed of light zips through the air faster than you can blink. You see its trace against your eyelids as you shut them against the fiery blast that roars as a result. Opening your eyes, you still see traces of the crimson bead's path toward its deadly end. Also, shout out to, they do have an October giveaway. They do giveaways every month, but this time you can get a copy of Wild Beyond the Witchlight, the dice, and the D&D cookbook, along with 1-year subscription to Describe. All right, so thank you, Describe, for sponsoring this video. So this was released shortly after the D&D celebration, and basically what it is a stat block for the War Priest NPC. Now, if you look on the left-hand side, as it says before, this is before, showing Volo's Guide to Monsters here along the top, and then on the right here is the new version of the War Priest shown in Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse. So if we zoom in a little bit, it's going to get a little fuzzy, but we can take a look. Most of the upper area stays the same as we continue to make our way through here. The only difference you'll see is it was any alignment. It's any race. It's now medium humanoid cleric. Any alignment. That's a minor change. They did also do the categorical change to add proficiency bonus in for things that are related to proficiency bonus to help make things a little easier for you to determine if you want to adjust things on your own. So that was a good change. Now, if you look, originally it just had spellcasting listed here. It says the priest is a 9th level spellcaster. Its wisdom is its ability modifier. Its DC is 15. It has +7 to hit, and it has the following spells prepared. And it lists off all the spells from first, cantrips through 5th level, which one it has, and it's like it has 1 slot for Flame Strike, Mass Cure Wounds, or Hold Monster, so you would know. And they've done an effort here to condense things down, make it a little bit easier on the DM and players alike. And then also, we'll see they have some other abilities. So then they also had 2 actions. They had multi-attack. They make 2 melee attacks with their maul, which is +7 to hit and does 2d6 +3 bludgeoning damage. They said now it does 2 maul attacks and it uses Holy Fire. They also said these adjustments were to bring them more into line with other creatures that fall into the challenge rating 9. So for example, I don't have a great one off the top of my head, but if you look through the monster manual or any monster supplement book and look at a challenge rating 9 monster, I feel like the War Priest will fall by the wayside compared to the other ones, because typically what makes a monster's challenge rating go up is their amount of damage that they can do. So you'll see it still has the maul attack, but it also now does 2d6 +3 bludgeoning damage plus 3d6 radiant damage. That's a big change. And then there's Holy Fire, so it's doing an additional 3d6 damage on every hit for the 2 hits that it makes, and it also uses this Holy Fire ability, right? Targets 1 creature within 60 feet. The target must make a DC 15 saving throw, a wisdom saving throw. On a failure, they take 2d8 +3 radiant damage and are blinded until the start of the War Priest's next turn. On a successful save, the target takes half as much damage and isn't blinded. So not only can it make 2 attacks, dealing an extra potential 66 damage on 2 regular hits a turn, it can also do this Holy Fire, which does ranged damage, and depending on how things are set up, could possibly lead to them being blinded, leading you to advantage on your maul attacks, therefore even potentially increasing the chance for a crit and even more damage down the road. But they have also adjusted the spellcasting stat block. Rather than this big old giant stat block, which I'm okay with because a lot of the time when I would make NPC characters, I would build out like an actual full character sheet, which is technically not what you're supposed to do, but I like building characters, and that's a way that I'm able to get my character building fix in while still being a dungeon master. But anyway, so what can they do at will? Light, spare the dying, and mending. Those were cantrips that I could do, and now it says I can do each of the following here once per day. And it's a DC 15, so it's Banishment, Command, Dispel Magic, Flame Strike, Guardian of Faith, Hold Person, Lesser Restoration, and Revivify. Now, if you take a look at it, for example, previously, it could have cast Revivify 3 times in that combat. The other part of it is, these are a ton of spell slots, and you are in one singular combat, typically with these NPCs. The chances of them getting a chance to blow through every single one of these spell slots, probably few and far between. So they changed it up to be like this, but also realize that they made the spell selection less, comparatively. But they also added in the extra damage to the Maul attack, which is possibly where there's a removal of some of the more damaging spells like Crusader's Mantle and Divine Favor and things like that were removed because they just gave it more damage outright. And then they also gave it Holy Fire as well. Now, if we scroll down towards the bottom, you'll see that it used to have a reaction called Guided Strike, which recharged on a short or a long rest. It grants a plus 10 bonus to the attack roll made by itself or another creature within 30 feet. And it can make this choice after it made the roll before it hits or misses. That has been removed. Now, Guided Strike is an ability that War Domain clerics have, and it has kind of been just removed completely. And we now have a bonus action that it can do every turn, or if it recharges here, called Healing Light. The War Priest or one creature of its choice within 60 feet regains 2d8 plus 3 hit points. Now that would remove need for something like Healing Word or something along those lines. Now this recharges on a 4 to 6, so in theory, on a given turn, if it has this up, it could heal itself or a creature of its choice for 2d8 plus 3 hit points, as well as attacking twice with the improved damage Maul and doing Holy Fire. And then also it has the option to swap stuff out for spellcasting. If it doesn't want to do 2 Maul attacks and Holy Fire, it could still possibly do Healing Light and a spellcasting move. Now there's 2 things you might have noticed, and if not, I'll clear it up and it'll become much more apparent when we talk about what's coming next. Holy Fire and Healing Light are not spells. They are not covered under spellcasting. Therefore, they cannot be counterspelled. And they also do not function in the mechanics of being able to cast a spell as an action and a bonus action, right? I could go ad nauseum for this. I've explained it a ton of times. People still don't seem to understand it. But the concept of the way spells and actions work, right? The only quantifier of you not being able to do multiple spells in a given turn or multiple turns, like things from Action Surge and whatnot, is basically if you cast a spell as a bonus action. If you cast a spell as a bonus action, you can only cast a cantrip as your action. That's how that works. So if you have Action Surge and you can cast 2 spells on a turn, you can cast a spell, followed up, Action Surge, cast another spell. As long as you don't cast a spell as a bonus action, then you still have your action. You're not limited to only a cantrip. But by making Healing Light, this healing ability, a bonus action but not a spell, you could still do Healing Light on a turn and then cast Hold Person or Flame Strike as your action, which I think was by design to not gimp this NPC stat block and allow them to do more on a given turn. Granted, you can see the overall power level of this creature has significantly increased, and I do believe that this is part of the whole future plans for whatever the next edition is to balance things out, as I've made comments on it, so many other people have as well, that challenge rating is not a good judge because challenge rating is just broken. Because one thing that's a challenge rating 1 versus another thing that's a challenge rating 1, this thing could be just a joke that you bowl over, and this thing could absolutely destroy your entire party. So I think this is an effort to sort of balance out challenge rating. So if you see a challenge rating 9, you know that it is a challenge rating 9. It's not a weak challenge rating 9 or a strong challenge rating 9. It is just, in fact, a challenge rating 9. And then again, that's like I said, you see the bonus action is Healing Light, not Healing Word, the spell, because then you can do it and still have access to your full action or spellcasting if you choose to use it. Now, if we go back over here to Wild Beyond the Witchlight, I guess, by the way, I'll throw it out here, minor spoilers for Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I am still planning to do my coverage of NPCs and monsters from Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I just have not gotten around to doing that yet. That will be coming out this week, as I imagine Fizzband stuff will start to show up, In fact, the book might show up at my doorstep sometime this week, so be on the lookout for more Fizzman's Treasury of Dragons stuff. It was no secret that Kelek, the sort of evil, greedy wizard type, quintessential wizardy guy, was going to be in this. But I'm going to show you his stat block now, so spoilers for that. But the important thing I want to show you is coming up. So here's his stat block. Now you can see here he is. But if you look at his actions, right, he has his special magic items. He can either make 3 attacks using Sorcerer's Bolt, the Staff of Striking, or a combination of them. He can also replace one of the attacks with a use of spellcasting. So we can see his spellcasting right here, right? It's Light Mage Hand, Prestidigitation at will, and once per day Dominate Beast, Fly, Mirror Image, or Web. We can see he has a Sorcerer's Bolt that has a range of 60 feet. Has a reach of 5 feet or 60 feet, so it can do either one, and it does 2d12 force damage. That is non-counterspellable, it is not a spell. The Staff of Striking is the magic item that he uses that he can just hit you with, and it can do extra damage, as the Staff of Striking can. But the one that got a lot of people up in arms is this ability here called Fiery Explosion. It recharges on a 4 to 6, so you can potentially have this up every round if you roll well enough. Kelek creates a magical explosion of fire centered on a point he can see within 120 feet of him. Each creature in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on that point must make a DC 14 dexterity saving throw, taking 10d6 damage on a failed save or half as much on a success. Now, if that sounds familiar to any of you, it should, because that's Fireball. That is essentially a 5th level Fireball. It is a 20-foot radius sphere, it explodes at a point within 120 feet. No, it doesn't necessarily here state whether it does damage to creatures or objects like a fireball typically does, but it is 10d6, so that would be an 8d6 fireball, 3rd level, upcast 2 levels to 10th level. Here's the thing. You can't counterspell Fiery Explosion because Fiery Explosion is not a spell. It is a ability. So he can cast Dominate Beast, Fly, Mirror Image, or Web, which you could counterspell. Or he could use Fiery Explosion and then get by it entirely. Also, he has Arcane Defenses here, which is essentially the shield spell that he can do 3 times per day that you also cannot counterspell. When he's hit by an attack, Kelek protects himself with an invisible barrier of force. Until the end of his next turn, he gains a +5 bonus to AC, including against the triggering attack. Again, the shield spell, however, quantified as Arcane Defense, a non-spell, you cannot counterspell it. Therefore, that is the case. Now, this might actually spin off into its own other video, but what do you guys think about this? This is a fundamental change to the way monsters and stat blocks and things are handled in Dungeons & Dragons. Could this be a stealth nerf to counterspell in a way? Possibly, right? We've seen, and as we know, and I've covered it here on the channel, counterspell is either a huge deal and it drives people up a freaking wall and they make campaigns against it and removing it from the game and everything, or they're okay with it and they don't mind. Yeah, it can get a little wonky with counterspelling counterspells and stuff like that. I agree. I understand that, but I also enjoy that, right? I mean, it also does make, classes that have counterspell that much more powerful in the grand scheme of things, right? If I have access to counterspell, I'm going to be in a better spot than if I don't, because when an enemy spellcaster is going to hurl something at me, I'm going to have to take it no matter what, or I can at least attempt to stop it with counterspell. And they obviously could attempt to counter my counterspell, and that leads to a whole chain of events that some people don't like. Again, doesn't really bother me. I don't have a problem with it. But could this be a stealth nerf to counterspell without changing it, but just removing the ability for monsters to do counterspell, or you as a PC to be able to counterspell things because they're not spells, they're abilities like Fiery Explosion or Arcane Defense or Sorcerer's Bolt or what have you? My only potential issue that I could see coming from this is if we don't get something similar in return. Now, maybe in this Advanced Player's Handbook or whatever we're going to call it coming in 2024, maybe that'll fix that. Where, you'll have more character abilities, less spells or something like that, right? Maybe Hunter's Mark, right, won't be a ranger spell. Maybe it'll be an ability, right? Maybe Eldritch Blast won't be a cantrip, it'll be an ability. Something like that removes those from being things that could be counterspelled. Now, reminder, the way counterspell is supposed to be handled, I still feel like is not 100% clear, but the way I understand it to be is that when someone is going to cast a spell is the point at which you choose to counterspell it. You don't get to hear the way it's handled often, again, I made a video on this, I could make more videos on this. A lot of times people are going to be like, I'm going to cast Cure Wounds at 8th level, and then the DM will be like, well, I'm going to counterspell that. What you're supposed to say, I think, is I'm going to cast a spell. Because the triggering effect of counterspell is when you see someone starting to cast a spell, not telling you what the spell is. I'm going to cast a spell. Would you like to counterspell it? Then you make your choice, yes, no, then the spell goes off. Same thing works in reverse. If I'm a DM and I say, hey, Kellick's going to cast a spell, and you say, okay, I'm going to counterspell it. Now, he might have been casting a cantrip and you counterspelled it. You don't know. You don't get to make that choice ahead of time unless your DM has some sort of identification mechanic where they can make, as part of the counterspell, a check to identify what the spell is. I've been thinking about including this in my game, and I kind of have done this, but my players seem to forget about it, where you have an option to make like an Arcana check to identify the spell, and basically something along the lines of like, if it's on your spell list, you're considered proficient with the Arcana check or something like that, or have advantage, whereas if it's not on your spell list, and then we could try to get into crazy mechanics like, have you seen this spell cast before? Do you know what it is? And that, I think, could be an interesting way, and like maybe there's some penalty, like you can just try to blindly counterspell it if you want, or you can attempt to identify it and counterspell it all in the same reaction, but maybe you take like a penalty to it because you're trying to process so much information in a split second. What is this spell? How do I stop it? And then like maybe that gives you like a -2 or disadvantage on the roll. I don't know, something like that to offset it, but to also give you the opportunity to not blow it on like he's going to cast Spare the Dying on his ally, not, power word kill on you. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's an interesting choice. I think it's to allow I think ultimately the point is to allow these new monsters and these new NPCs and whatnot to be able to at least do a cool thing before they're murdered. Now, Kellick has 45 hit points and a 12 AC, not including arcane defense. All right? You close the gap on this guy and you have any kind of decent strength, even with arcane defense up, his AC is a 17. That's easy to overcome with a decent physical martial character. If you have something like sneak attack or smite, you might instantly murder this guy in one turn, no problem, right? It's entirely possible. But if you don't, and he has his fiery explosion ability, he might get a chance to use fiery explosion and then die, but he got to do a cool thing instead of having a counterspell, and he basically did literally nothing. I'm not sure how I feel about it. We'll have to see when we get Morden Canaans in hand and are able to do some comparisons side by side to other monsters to see how rampant this is. Is this throughout the entire book where they've added fundamental spells as abilities? Do they only do it where it makes sense for the characters? I really don't know. It's definitely an interesting thing to see. And like I said, if this is sort of a build-up for something we might see in this advanced version of Dungeons & Dragons, where they reprint the rules and adjust it, and like I said, maybe player characters are going to get more abilities that they can use as opposed to spells. Like, I do still fundamentally feel like Eldritch Blast should be an ability, not a cantrip. Because so many cool things are powered off of Eldritch Blast, all the invocations and whatnot, it almost seems like it shouldn't be a choice. It should be just a thing you're granted. And if that's the case, and you make that an ability, that is no longer counterspellable, and that's great, and I think that could definitely be a nice balance to this, but we have to wait 2 years on the player side. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you all next time.